Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Practice of Being Human. Today's episode, I wanted to share a story. I wanted to start with a young man with whom I've worked this last year. And a few months back, I spoke to him. This is a young man who's just graduated high school. He's super smart, driven, kind, and he'd also gotten into a great school, had a lot of wonderful friends and a bright future, and yet he found himself sitting alone in a hotel room, far, far from home, and feeling completely overwhelmed. And this wasn't because anything terrible had happened, but because life was changing and the future was uncertain. Because for him, in that moment, a relationship had ended. Now, the relationship had ended sooner or before this, but there was more of a sense of ending when he was in this hotel room and on that particular night. And he was lonely. He didn't know what came next. And in other words, he was being human like the rest of us. The moral of today's story and what I want to share with you is that I think many young adults believe that once I get into the school, once I find my people, once I find my major, once I find my person, then I will finally feel secure. But here's the problem. You knew that was coming, right? Life doesn't work that way. Every answer, every experience creates a new one. Every answer creates another question. Every experience creates a new experience. And every certainty eventually becomes uncertainty. Every chapter closes and a new one opens. This is life. This is what it is to be human. So let's talk about the unique season between high school and college and what shifts in these young people from where they were these last 4 years to where they are in this very kind of new territory, unknown, and holding pattern, holding space. And the uniqueness of this is that you're not really that high school kind of kid anymore. You're not quite an adult yet, but you're living kind of in that in between. It's the liminal space, as we like to say. And there's a quote, Glennon Doyle said something about we spend so much of our lives wanting to get through the hallway without realizing that the hallway is life. How cool is that? We spend so much of our lives wanting to get through the hallway without realizing that the hallway is life. So think about your hallways and when you find yourself there. And the summer before college, I like to refer to as the hallway. And hallways can be uncomfortable. That hallway between high school and college isn't necessarily always uncomfortable, but it does hold this sense of uncertainty, unknown. And it holds a lot of hope and promise, but also a lot of potentially sadness and loss and fear and insecurity. And what I want to share, loneliness is not evidence that something is wrong. And for this young man in the hotel room, wasn't the problem. Loneliness was information. It was an invitation. And it is often, we find this over and over again, the birthplace of growth. And many students who've never experienced loneliness might not know what to do with it. And many may have experienced loneliness, but never allowed themselves to experience it, to feel it. And they tend to immediately distract themselves on the phone or in a relationship or through achievement or busyness or numbing. But here's the thing about loneliness that this young man found out, and I share with all of you. And I would just want to say that potentially as life unfolds and you feel some loneliness, or you find yourselves in the hallway or in a hotel room and feeling this big, big emotion, what is it asking of you? Who are you when nobody is validating you? Who are you when nobody is choosing you? Who are you? when you're sitting with yourself. And I think one of the biggest lessons from this young man's experience is that when he was lonely, he created a story, a very intricate, dramatic story. And it came from a place of scarcity, and it was in light of the loneliness. And when we're feeling a feeling like loneliness, we're going to create stories that only compound our loneliness, because that's what we do. We get very unilaterally focused, and our brain is operating from loneliness. So everything we see and how we are, whatever we're making things mean, is coming from that place. And his way of making meaning of this time was, I'll never find friends. Everyone else belongs. I got left behind. I'll never love anyone like that again. And college is going to be terrible. So here's what the brain does. It begins to forecast. But what I want to offer, and I think is so important for you to hear, is that feelings are going to come and they're going to go. And they are invitations, but they are not prophecies. The brain forecasts. It begins forecasting all sorts of things. But again, if feelings aren't prophecies, and yet what they are experiences, invitations. A lonely weekend does not equal a lonely future. A lonely semester doesn't equal a lonely future. A breakup does not equal permanent heartbreak. And a disappointing experience does not equal a disappointing life. So I'm going to ask this question. And I asked this young man just today, because we had a conversation about so many of these things today, that he's in a very different place than he was a few months ago. What if college isn't primarily about achievement? What if it's about becoming? What if it's about expansion? What if it's about building our home, our inner home, in a way that we might be building? We have our foundation, and we might have a lovely first floor or a fairly developed first floor, and we start to set the stage and tone for the second floor. And that becoming is about creating space and rooms that are spaces and rooms you want to frequent, you want to visit, you want to like, you want to love, you want to feel safe in. And this young man said something beautiful today. He wasn't talking about GPA. He wasn't talking about internships. He wasn't talking about success. But what he was talking about were friendships, connection, learning, belonging, experiences. He was talking about college in a way that it wasn't about building a resume per se, but it was about building a self and a life. And he said to me, the future doesn't change the past, which I think is incredibly wise for this young 18-year-old to recognize. But a relationship ending doesn't make it meaningless. It doesn't make it all for naught. It doesn't discount it. But many months ago, he was kind of making it mean that. A friendship changing doesn't erase what was real. A chapter closing doesn't invalidate the chapter. And young adults desperately need this. They need to know this, because when breakups happen, when friendships take a alternate route, when identity becomes something that is being grappled with, something can be over and still have been incredibly beautiful and meaningful. So the skill that matters most, I believe, is not confidence, it's not achievement, it's not certainty, but it is self-trust, because this grows all of those things. The ability to say, I don't know exactly what's coming, but I trust myself to meet it. And that is adulthood, right? I don't know how things are going to unfold, but I'm going to show up for whatever it is. I'm going to figure things out. If I don't know, I'll get resourceful. I will seek out support. I'll dig in a little deeper. I will find my way. I will build the bridge. And that is such an important piece, because it grows a capacity and a competence with hard things, not knowing, learning, being a beginner. And it gives us that sense of confidence. We can figure things out. So if you're heading into college this year, here's what I want you to know. You do not have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know your major, and you don't need to know your future friends and spouse and partner and all the things. You do not need to know your career. You don't even need to know exactly who you are yet, right? You're still answering that very rich question. Who am I? And what am I curious about? What lights me up? What do I want to continue to grow into and ask questions around? And I have wonder and amazement and excitement and possibility around. And what are the things that no longer light me up? And what can I shed? And what can I keep? And what do I want to build more of? Your job is not to know all the answers to this, but your job is to stay open, to stay curious, and to be brave enough to be yourself. And this young man said this so beautifully. He said, if I'm authentic and I show up as me, that is going to help me find my people. Not trying to fit in, not trying to shapeshift, not trying to become someone that he thinks he needs to be in order to fit in and belong, but instead to already know his belonging and then to find his people by being himself very well and trusting the unfolding, surrendering to the unfolding and knowing. Now, of course, he can't know all of this yet in terms of how this is all going to go, but even just going in with that knowing and that mindset, that heart-minded mindset, whatever we want to call it, that in itself helps us trust the unfolding. And here's the most important thing to remember. The goal is not certainty, but it is self-trust, because life is always going to be uncertain, but you can learn to trust yourself and trust the person walking through the uncertainty and know, ultimately, you don't know what it means to be okay, but you believe that you will be okay, whatever that looks like. And that, my friends, there is no price tag I can put on that, but to say, carry on, go, be you, show up, be curious, be open, allow the unfolding. And when those lonely moments come, to not think all things are lost, but to say, here it is. Here I'm feeling the loneliness. How do I engage with loneliness? How do I relate to that? As much as how do I relate to uncertainty? All of these things we can continue to build our relationship with. And with that, I think we build our capacity. And with capacity, we have confidence. And with confidence, we move through the world knowing that although we don't know what okay is, we will be okay. All right, my friends, to all of you, enjoy your hallway and whatever hallway you're in. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, big love.